Hey guys, it's Kristen with ICStarsQuilting.com. Hi, welcome back to my channel. I'm so glad that you're here today. I have a really good tutorial that I want to share with you today. Check out this quilt. Isn't it beautiful? For just the top of the quilt, all you need is 3 yards of fabric. This is a super fast, easy quilt to create. Real quick, before we get started on that, if you have not subscribed to my channel, hi. Nice to meet you. I'm Kristen. I share tips and tricks on modern quilting. I also share tutorials like the video that you're watching right now. If you have not subscribed to my channel, do me a favor and hit that little button down below. It really helps me out and it makes me happy. So let's get back to the tutorial. So this is the quilt we're making today. It's a 3-yard quilt. So I'd say that this is a beginner level quilt. Probably more so a slightly comfortable beginner level quilt. Okay, you need to know your basics. The blocks are the same all the way throughout. I'm going to show you exactly how to make it step by step. Everything on today's tutorial is absolutely free. There's a link in the description box down below where you can download the pattern for this quilt. This is what the quilt started out as, okay? This is a yard trio fabric subscription from Pineapple Fabrics. I love them, okay? I love their fabric pairing. Now this fabric trio right here is a subscription pack that you can get, and this is the price right here that it costs every single month, and it's a surprise every single month. So it's fun, right? But they send you 3 different yards of fabric, and also as a bonus this month I also got a scrappy trio, which if you've watched some of my other videos, I have one that is on the Dottie's scrap sampler bag that I get every single month. It's a super affordable stash building fabric subscription that you can get that is absolutely amazing every single time. And I've had so many of my subscribers and my viewers and my readers come back and tell me that they now are subscribed to that as well because they absolutely love that box, right? It's $18.89 a month. Shipping is included. Everything is perfect. So this scrappy trio that I got is along the same line. So these are just slightly smaller than a fat quarter, right? So they're anywhere from between 10 to 12 inches to 21 inches. So it's still a really good chunk of fabric, but it's slightly smaller than a fat quarter. So this one, let me see if I can show you. This one has chickens on it, okay? And then this other one has these gorgeous flowers, and there's one in between, which I'm not gonna pull it out of the package, but you can see it's that like white and red checkered right there. Isn't that gorgeous? So this is just a bonus that I got this month with my yard trio package. These are the fabrics that I'm working with for this 3-yard quilt, okay? We have some gorgeous dragonflies, we have some cute yellow stars, and then we have some beautiful butterflies. This is gonna be really pretty. I'm super excited about this quilt. Let me show you exactly what you need to do to cut. So I have my first fabric here, and this is one of the ones that I'm going to use for the 6 by 10 inch pieces. So what I like to do is I like to go ahead and unfold the fabric, except for this right here. I like to keep this part, so down here is my selvage, up here is the fold. I like to keep this folded, okay? That's gonna make things a little bit easier as we go along. So just go ahead and keep that folded, but you do want to make sure that you're starting off with a nice straight edge. So I like to use the lines on my cutting mat as well right here. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna butt this up right next to this line that I know is square right here on my cutting mat, and kind of smooth things out and start off with a nice straight cut, because as you can see right here, this is not perfectly straight. Now this was just the way that it came from the store, right? So we want to make sure that we don't trust that that is perfect, because you just can't trust that it's perfect. So I'm going to go and I'm going to make sure that all of my fabric is above this line, and I'm going to try and cut off the least amount that I can here. And that right there is all the fabric that I have wasted so far. So next thing is we want to cut in strips that are 10 inches wide, okay? So again, I'm gonna use the lines here on my mat because my ruler is only 6 inches wide right now. Now I could go get a different ruler, but I'm trying to make this simple where you don't have to use all of the fancy tools. Okay, you can use what you have. So go ahead and measure out 10 inches. So we have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 inches here. And double check everything that you do. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Double check every cut that you make because you only have 3 yards here to work with. You want to make sure that you get the most out of every yard. So I'm going to do a strip that is 10 inches, then I'm going to do another strip that is 10 inches, and then I'm going to do one final strip that is only 6 inches wide. Okay, this is my strip that I cut that is only 6 inches wide. This one, if you look at the cutting diagram, you'll see that we do need to open this up, okay? So I undid it. It's just one layer of fabric now. And I am going to do is cut this off down here at the bottom. I don't want the selvage, okay? It's pretty, but we don't really want it to be a part of our quilt. So it is very important that you get accurate cutting to the best of your ability when you're quilting. I did notice when I started focusing on the exactness of my cutting and the preciseness of my sewing, that is when I noticed my actual quilting skills began to improve immensely. So it's in those little things. That's where you're gonna find you grow the biggest when you're learning how to quilt, is in those little bitty moments. Now, same with this that I made that are 10 inches wide, we're gonna go the other way. So on that last piece that I made that was 6 inches wide and I cut them 10 inches long, we're gonna do the same thing, but they're gonna go this way. But all we're starting out with is strips, so we're gonna make this easy, okay? So same thing, you wanna trim off your selvage right here. I normally like to line up one side of my fabric because I know it's straight, and then use that as a guide to chop off the selvage. There will be a little bit of scraps, but it's very minimal in this quilt. And my ruler happens to be 6 inches wide, so I just know here is my 6 by 10 piece right here. At least if you're gonna have scrap fabric of pieces that you're not gonna use, at least try and make them where they're kind of chunky where you can use them for another project. This is really cute fabric. I would hate for it to go to waste. So I'm gonna save this for another project. And I have all of these cut, and now I'm gonna move on to my butterfly fabric. fabrics, you're going to need pieces that are 6" by 10". And then on your 1 accent fabric, you're gonna need pieces that are 2" by 10" and 2" by 7.5". Now I know that those seem small and those numbers are kind of meaningless, but I'm gonna show you exactly what to do with those. Now this piece is just slightly different. It's really same concept, just slightly different approach to it. What you're gonna do is you're gonna open it up, not all the way. I still like to leave it folded here at the top, and you're going to cut 14 strips that are 2 inches wide right here, after you make sure that you start with a nice straight cut line. Then you'll cut 14 strips that are 2 inches wide, and then I'll show you what to do after that. The more that you do this, the more that you'll realize that this line over here is pretty wavy, and even though it looks straight, it's not, and we can't just trust that something is straight, okay? So you're gonna cut 2-inch strips. You'll get 14, and then you'll have just a little bit left over. So most of this piece of fabric is going to be used up. Okay, so if you look at this diagram with me, you'll see all of the strips that we're going to need off of this fabric, okay? You're going to need 14 strips that are 2 inches wide. Just use this diagram here as a visual and keep it in the back of your mind as what we're going for. Here is all of our strips. Now it doesn't really matter if you keep them all perfectly lined or anything, but I want you to take 6 of these strips that you have out of the 14 and set them aside. Those are gonna be a different size than the rest of the strips. So take 6 strips, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and set them aside because we're going to do those a different size. Now for the ones that are remaining, you're going to cut them into 10-inch pieces. Now again, you want to make sure that you cut the selvage off because we don't need that in our quilt. But for the rest of them, you can cut at 10-inch pieces. You'll get about 4 10-inch pieces per each strip. And because this is smaller and I don't need my giant ruler, I'm gonna use something like this template right here, which I don't need the measuring lines on it. I just need something straight. So I'm gonna use the lines on my mat here, and I'm just gonna cut at the 10-inch mark and go until I have 4 per each one. That's what I have left over, just a couple inches left over. So I'm gonna put that into a pile far away from all of my other pieces that I'm doing. So these are 4 for 1. Now, you have quite a few of these strips to do. So if you're looking for a little hack here, may I suggest stacking maybe 3 pieces of fabric on top of each other. Now, this does take a little bit of extra care, okay? You want to make sure that your pieces are lined up, okay? You don't want them spread out where you're gonna end up making an incorrect cut. You want them lined up all the way down, and I just kind of shake them out. Make sure there's no folds or twists or anything, and make sure, like this right here, you can see where one of them is kind of, let me pull this up, where one of them is kind of not in line with the others. That could lead to an incorrect cut. So I'm gonna go through, I'm just gonna make sure that things are stacked the way that they should be. And I'm gonna cut 3 on top of each other. It makes it a little bit faster, but it's up to you. Make sure, the key is you want nice straight lines, okay? You don't want any crooked lines. how this cutting at the very beginning seems like really tedious, but if you get into this habit of making your cuts all beforehand, the rest of the quilt goes together so much faster, okay? You don't have to stop what you're doing. You can kind of get in a flow of, okay, now I'm sewing. I'm not having to stop what I'm doing, stop the flow of energy that I have while I'm working on something. It's easier for me to batch my tasks. That's kind of what I attribute it to is, you know, when you're in math class and you're working on math, you're not worried about English. You're not worried about, you know, your foreign language class or anything. You're only working on math. So when I'm doing this and I'm sitting here and I'm cutting, I'm only worried about getting precise cutting. I'm not worried about my seams or when I'm going to sew this or how long the block is going to take. I'm only worried about cutting. And that makes it easier to focus, okay? So if you're a little scatterbrained like me and you have a hard time or you're not always exactly precise when you're cutting, you know, batching your tasks like that can be a really, really good way to make yourself a better quilter, make yourself be a more present quilter so that you don't make silly mistakes, okay? And also when you do a really repetitive task, you get better at it. Okay, you're better at it than if you stop, you know, halfway through math class, go do a little bit of English for 10 minutes, and then you come back and you do math. You kind of lose your flow, right? So that's kind of, you know, I know we're not in math class. There is math involved here, but that's kind of where I'm going with this, is you want to make sure that your tasks are batched and make sure that you focus on one thing at a time while you're doing this. These are all my 2" by 10" pieces. Now, I'm going to set those aside, and it's time to bring in the other 6 strips that you have here. Now these, you're going to cut at 2" by 7.5 inches. These you're going to get 5 7.5" pieces per each long strip, okay? So I'm going to do the same thing I did before because I actually found that that worked pretty well. To start with my most noticeable selvage on this side, and I'm going to stack 3 on top of each other. Now I like to use these clips right here. I've talked about these many times before, but I really love these clips for keeping things together. So as I am moving these strips and these pieces, all these pieces that I have cut for this quilt, I will normally put a clip on them like that so that I don't have to worry about them getting separated. Now, these I kind of made like really messy piles, and I went ahead and I stacked my butterflies on top of my dragonflies, and I'm not really worried about these getting lost so much. But these smaller ones, I do want to keep these separate, and you'll see why in just a few minutes. All you're going to need is one of every single thing that we cut. You're going to need one block that is 6 by 10. You're going to need one piece that is 10 by 2, and one piece that is 2 by 7.5 inches. Simple, simple. First things first, you're going to sew your large piece to your side block. Then after that's done, you're going to come in and you're going to sew this piece to here. Okay, I've got all my pieces here at the sewing machine. Everything is cut to the right size. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to take your long 10" by 2" strip, and you're going to put them right sides together down on your block. They're exactly the same size, so match up your sides and your top, and you're going to lay that in your sewing machine. Now I like my stitch length to be 1.8, okay? I like a nice, tiny, tight stitch on there. That's going to make a stronger quilt, and it's going to make sure that your quilt does not fall apart as easy, either in the washing machine or while you're waiting to put all of the pieces together. So I piece on a 1.8. I usually quilt on a much thicker, longer stitch, but I piece on like a 1.8 to 2 on my sewing machine. And then I'm gonna sew 1/4 inch from the edge of my fabric all the way down this 10" side. if you ever have questions about the size of your seam, this right here is a measuring gauge, also called like a seam gauge. It has all kinds of different measurements on it. As you can see, it's kind of a wonky shaped piece, but this one right here is the one that I use the most. There we go. You can see it has a 1/4 inch right here that I can hold up next to my seam and see that yes, it is indeed exactly a 1/4 inch from my thread to the side of my fabric. Just a handy little tool, not necessary, but a handy tool if you want to have that on. Next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna press just a little bit on here to make sure that this is nice and flat. I find it easier to press to one side rather than open, so I tend to go to one side. Now that I have that pressed, I'm going to take my last piece here and lay it across the bottom. And it should be the exact same size. If you're finding that your piece here is not exactly right, I want you to go back and check your seams. Also check to make sure that you cut your pieces exactly right in the first place. They should match up perfect right along the bottom of your piece here. Go ahead and sew another 1/4 inch all the way down these sides. And there is your final finished block. Now I'm gonna take this over to the ironing table, get it all nice and flat and perfectly pressed. Let me share a tool that I really like to use when I am pressing my blocks and I want them extra nice and crisp and perfect, so that I know that when I piece them together, I'm getting the most accuracy that I can on this. I use a product called Flatter, and it's just a spray. And this one happens to be the lacy one. There's different scents that this comes in, but this is the lacy one. And you just kind of finely mist your fabric. And I don't know exactly how to explain it, but its name, Flatter, serves it well. If you can see, there is a little bit of steam coming off of this as I iron it, and that's just because it's like evaporating the flatter, but it makes everything really, really good. I especially like it on these seams right here because it gets them really, really flat, okay? So I'm just going lightly over the whole thing, concentrating a little bit more on the seams that I just sewed to make sure that they are pressed perfect. But that's it. That's the entire block. So I'm going to do this exact process for all of my dragonfly pieces and all of my butterfly pieces, and then I will show you what to do next on the design board. So you don't have to worry about like which side or anything. Just make sure that you do one side on the 10-inch side and one side on the 7.5-inch side, and you're good to go. Speaking of batching tasks, here's another tip you can do. I'm taking all of the strips right now that are 10 inches by 2 inches, and I'm sewing them to my bigger pieces. Then I'm going to go and I'm going to press each one of those individually at the end, and then go back and sew my 7.5-inch pieces. That way I'm only focusing on one task at a time, but at the very end, all of my blocks will be done at exactly the same time. got all of our sewing done. I have made 2 piles here on my table. Basically, I have my butterflies and I have my dragonflies. So if you want to call it like an A side and a B side or something, your different blocks that you have here with your main fabrics. This is not something that you have to put out on a design board because the design is actually quite repetitive, but sometimes I find that it really helps to see the whole quilt and make sure that you have everything positioned, because it's very easy when you're working at one piece at a time to get something off kilter and maybe backwards or upside down. And if you lay it all like out like this before it's sewn, then you can actually see when there's a piece that's off kilter. So I like to lay all my designs on the design board. If you are in the market for a design board, I have a video on how I put this together, how I use it. Just check the description box down below. You'll see everything down there. But I have videos on how I did this design board, as well as chain piecing, which is something that you, as a quilter, you should really understand how to do and how to make it really easy on you. Chain piecing is one of my favorite ways to pull a quilt together very quickly without having to sew each row at a time, and also increase your chance of getting the pieces in the wrong order. So I'm gonna go ahead and lay this out on the design board behind me so we can see it. I still have a few more pieces to go on this quilt, but already you can see the forms taking shape. I love how this yellow right here kind of has a almost an airbrush look to it, so it gives it to some dimension as it's going down. And you can see these both have a black background, and so there's a little bit of differentiation between the 2 blocks here, but you know, start to think about how this would look if you use different colors, or if you use different patterns, or if you use you know, gradients. There's lots of ways that you can take on this quilt. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna do the rest of these, and then I'm gonna pull it all off in the columns and start chain piecing it together. Ta-da! Quick note about customizing this pattern. Now, this is a really good size quilt for like a lap quilt, okay? It's not probably enough to cover a regular size adult, but you can take some of the leftover fabric that we have, or even incorporate a little bit of scrap fabric to make a border on this quilt. You know, it's totally up to you. The point is, I want you to customize this quilt to make it work for you. Any quilt pattern that you come across, you can change. There is no written rule that says you have to follow it exactly. Now, if you're doing a sewing pattern for like clothes or something, that's something you want to follow exactly. But if you're just doing a quilt like this, where it's just a fun piece, go ahead and add a little bit of customization. Add some borders. You could even go a little bit further with this and add some sashing in between these blocks to just stretch it just a little bit further and make it a little bit bigger. I encourage you to do what feels right for you. If you get an idea, act on that little spark and make it work for you. And that's that. So it's really just step by step, continuing, making sure that you press through to the very end. It's really, really easy. I love this quilt pattern. I am in love with the way that the fabrics came out. These aren't typically something that I would have picked out in store, but I love the way that this came out. Look at the very final product of this quilt top. These colors are gorgeous, and I love, love, love the way that this yellow just adds that extra sense of wow to this quilt. It makes it fun. It makes the colors pop in the butterflies and in the dragonflies. It's really a gorgeous quilt top. Now, this can be done with any 3 yards. It doesn't have to be this, okay? It can be done with any fabric you like. It can be used to highlight any fabric that you are in love with. I really hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. I'm always happy to answer your questions. I'm always happy to make it easier on you. If there is something that I did not cover in this video and it's something that you would like to learn about, you can do so in the comments down below. I answer all the comments down below myself, and I try and keep up with everything, and I also try and make content that you really love. So if there's something I didn't get to, please feel free to let me know. I'm Kristen with ICStarsQuilting.com. I hope that you have a wonderful day. I'll see you next time. Bye.